What if the worst day of your life wasn't the end? What if it was only the beginning? We all think we know what losing everything feels like. We think we've hit the floor. But what if that loss was actually a cold, hard training ground? What if it was just preparing you for a fight you never signed up for? A fight you aren't even sure you want to win? See, we expect tragedy to come with a scream. We expect the world to shake. But the truth? Sometimes, life doesn't break you with noise. It doesn't give you the dignity of a warning. It breaks you in the absolute terrifying silence of a life you no longer recognize. This is the story of a woman standing on the edge of a world that no longer feels real. She didn't just lose the person she loved. She lost her reflection in the mirror. She walked into the wilderness not to find herself, but to let the silence swallow what was left of her. But the universe has a cruel way of testing those who think they have nothing left to lose. Because what happened next, what waited for her in the shadows of those trees, is something most people would never survive. Not because they aren't strong, but because they still have a soul to protect. This is Apex 2026, a story about the moment the hunted becomes the hunter. And this is the aftermath, where story goes beyond the screens. We meet her at her lowest, and it's not what you see in the movies. There are no dramatic screams, no breaking of glass, no cinematic outbursts, just silence. The kind of heavy, suffocating silence that sits in the center of your chest and refuses to leave. It's a guest that has moved in and taken over the house. She has just lost someone, and it wasn't just someone. It was her anchor, the person who gave her life its color, its meaning, its North Star. And suddenly everything feels pointless. The house isn't just a home anymore. It's a museum of things that used to matter. Food has no taste. The sun feels too bright, too loud. And sleep? Sleep becomes a stranger she's constantly chasing, but can never quite catch. She's not living anymore. Not really. She's just existing. A ghost haunting her own life. You know that feeling? That terrifying moment when you realize the world is still spinning? Life is continuing for everyone else. But for you, time has simply stopped. See, we've been lied to. Grief doesn't always look like crying. It doesn't always have a face wet with tears. Sometimes, it looks like a clean house. It looks like a person showing up to work on time. It looks like waking up every single morning and quietly wishing you hadn't. Because when the why is gone, every how becomes a mountain you aren't sure you want to climb. Just when she thinks she's hit rock bottom, just when she thinks the world has nothing left to take, life proves her wrong. The universe doesn't care about your grieving process. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. Suddenly, the silence is shattered. She isn't just a woman in pain anymore. She's a woman in the crosshairs. She is thrown into a survival situation, brutal, cold, and completely unexpected. The stakes have shifted. It's no longer about the weight in her chest. It's about the air in her lungs. It's no longer about deep thoughts or memories. It's about the raw, primitive instinct of staying alive. But here's the problem. The terrifying truth most hero movies ignore. How do you fight to survive when you don't even care if you live? That's the real battle of Apex. It isn't the hunter in the woods. It isn't the terrain or the weather. It's that quiet, seductive voice inside her head whispering, "Why even try? Why run? Wouldn't it be easier to just let go?" See, we talk about the will to live like it's a given. We think it's a button that just turns on when things get scary, but for some, it isn't. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't surviving the situation, it's convincing yourself, in the middle of the fire, that your life is still worth saving. It's the moment you decide that even a broken life is still a life. At first, when she falters, the hesitation is paralyzing. She doubts every step. She doubts every breath. There are moments where she stands perfectly still, almost inviting the end. She almost gives up. But then, something strange begins to happen, something ancient. The human body has a secret. It has a way of fighting. Even when the mind is already checked out, it has a survival code written in the blood that doesn't care about your sadness. Suddenly, she isn't thinking anymore. She's acting. She starts making decisions. Quick ones, sharp ones, lethal ones. Not because she's healed, not because she's found her spark again, but because she has no other choice. She begins to adapt to the shadows. She stops being the victim of her surroundings and starts becoming a part of them. The fear that used to make her heart skip, it's turning into focus. The pain that used to keep her in bed, it's becoming the fuel that moves her limbs. And slowly, that broken version of herself, the one who went into the woods to disappear, starts changing into something the world should be afraid of. See, we all want to be strong when it's convenient. But the truth is, you don't find your real strength when life is easy. You find it the moment life gives you absolutely no other option. But even as she fights, even as she moves like a shadow, her past refuses to stay buried. The trauma doesn't care that there's a killer in the woods. It demands to be felt. Without warning, the memories flood back. The sound of a specific laugh, the way the light hit a room on a Tuesday afternoon, the small, quiet moments that used to be her normal. And then, the crash, the loss, the silence that followed. And for a second, right there in the dirt, she breaks again. Because you realize that surviving physically, that's just mechanics. That's just muscle and bone doing their job. But surviving emotionally, that is a completely different kind of war. One where the enemy isn't outside, it's behind your own eyes. She finds herself staring into the void, asking the one question that has no answer. Why am I still here when they are gone? That question is a poison. It's a weight that has destroyed more people than any physical enemy ever could. It's the ultimate trap of the human mind. See, we call it survivor's guilt, but that name is too clinical. It's actually a haunting. Sometimes you don't just mourn the person who died. You start to resent the person who lived. You question why you were chosen to stay in a world that feels empty without them. And until you answer that question, you aren't really surviving. You're just waiting for the end to catch up.
Then, in the middle of the dark, everything changes. It's not because the forest gets quieter. It's not because her enemy gets weaker or the situation gets easier. It's because she changes. Deep in the marrow of her bones, she realizes something that changes the gravity of the entire world. If she is still breathing, if her heart is still beating against all odds, then maybe, just maybe, there is a reason. She stops running from the pain. She stops trying to numb the ache in her chest. Instead, she reaches into that fire and grabs it. She starts using it. Every memory that used to paralyze her, it becomes her motivation. Every moment of laughter she lost, it becomes a reason to fight for another sunrise. The loss isn't a weight anymore. It's a momentum. She isn't fighting for who she was anymore. She's fighting for the woman she is becoming right now, the one who refuses to be erased. Look closely, because this is the truth of survival. She didn't survive because she was the strongest, the fastest, or the most prepared. She survived because in the moment where it was easiest to lie down and die, she made the conscious or brutal decision not to give up. In the end, she makes it. She steps out of the trees and back into the world. But don't be mistaken. She isn't the same person who walked into those woods. No. The version of her that was defined only by her grief. The version that was fragile and looking for an exit. That version died the day she lost everything. She left that woman behind in the dirt. What remains now is something else. Someone stronger. Someone a little colder, perhaps. Someone much wiser. She is the living proof that life doesn't always give you a neat, tidy closure. It doesn't always hand you a happily ever after to make up for the pain. Sometimes, it just pushes you forward. It forces you to keep moving until the scenery finally changes. And maybe, just maybe, that is what survival really is. It's not about being okay. It's not about pretending the scars aren't there or that the house doesn't still feel a little too quiet. It's about standing up in the wreckage, looking at the horizon, and choosing to continue anyway.
So, I have to ask you, and I want you to really think about it. If the world collapsed tomorrow, if you lost every person, every dream, and every safety net you ever relied on, and right there, in the middle of the wreckage, life gave you just one more chance to fight, one chance to stand up even if your legs were shaking, one chance to breathe, even if the air felt like lead. What would you do? Would you take it? Would you reach into the dark and grab that chance with everything you have left? Or would you finally just let go? Let me know in the comments. Are you a survivor, or are you still searching for a reason to be?
If this story touched you, if you felt that ache in your chest while watching her struggle, then you already understand something many people don't. You understand that real strength, it isn't found in the shouting. It isn't found in the bravado or the noise. Strength is quiet. It's the small, steady voice that speaks when you're at your absolute weakest. It's the breath you take when you didn't think you could take another. And the most beautiful part? It always shows up exactly when you need it the most. Keep going.